Hello. Hope everyone is doing well. I'm recording this on a pretty wet Monday morning. So if you're here, I'm glad you came. I'm glad you got out of bed. I know it wasn't easy today. If you're at home and you still have to quarantine, well, welcome. More and more people are coming back. So hopefully that's a good thing. Today, we're going to be reading a story that I keep forgetting the name of. So it's The Setting Sun and the Rolling World. Now, this is a story that is as old as time. There have been a lot of movies about it, a lot of songs. In fact, one of my favorite songs I'd like to play for you tomorrow, but we're going to try to get as much of this read as we can. But it's basically the story of a child growing up, becoming an adult, and then having a different idea for their life than their parents have. So we're going to read a story, Zimbabwe. Remember, that's why we watch those videos on Friday, so you could understand a little bit about Zimbabwe, how it is today. This is more of a traditional story. So it's a father who tends the land, who's a farmer. So a father who's a farmer, and he wants his son to follow in his footsteps, take over the family business. And the son realizes, like, no, it's like this way of life is disappearing. Like we can't get enough to eat as it is. Like we have to go get jobs in the real world, the Zimbabwe that we saw possibly. So it seems like this might take place a long time ago, but there is an airplane that does fly over the family farm. So that's why I wanted to show you what Zimbabwe looks like today, because even in this country, we still have farmers. We have people who live out in the country. But then, of course, we have, New York City and Zimbabwe, Zahari, the capital. We saw that. It's like 1.2 million people, I think it was. So let's get into a little bit of the background, but just keep in mind, I mean, you might be dealing with this in your life right now, even though you're probably a bit younger than the main character. I would imagine he's probably 17, 18, 19, 20, somewhere in there. But you may have, hopefully you have a somewhat of an idea of what you want to do when you graduate high school. And it's still 5 years away. Well, 4.5 years away. It keeps getting closer and closer every day. Hopefully you have somewhat of an idea. You could change your mind all the time. I changed my mind in college. I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly, but hopefully, and I've talked to some of you, like you have really good ideas on what you want to do when you get out of high school. And not all of them involve a 4-year college. That's important. Like if you're a 4-year college person, we have a lot of them on this team. If you're not a 4-year college person, that's cool. You can make a ton of money if that's important to you. Money's not always the most important thing, but it helps, provide for your family and stuff like that. So lots of choices that you should have in the back of your mind. You don't need them in the front of your mind, but military, plumber, teacher. I don't know, man. Teaching's a tough profession. If you want to be a teacher, get with me after class. We can talk. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities out there. And hopefully your family's on board. You're like, oh, yeah, that'd be great. But if your family's not on board, they want you to do something different, then this story might ring true. Before we get into the actual story, we should take a look at the background. And I'm right here. And let's just highlight it in yellow so you can see it here. So this is what I'm reading right now. And you actually know a little bit of this already. Zimbabwe is a landlocked country in Africa, means there is no ocean available to it. Traditionally, many Zimbabweans have made a living farming the land. When farming goes well, food is plentiful, but farmers are always at the mercy of unpredictable rainfall and weather. So if you remember back to the video that we saw about Zimbabwe, there was a man, the boring man. It was a boring man walking through Zahari, the capital, and he had mentioned there's a drought and the fountain wasn't working because water it wasn't reliable. So if you're a farmer, you need water, you need rainfall. And if there's a drought, I'm pretty sure your crops aren't going to do well. Let's see, what else can we look at here? The author, right there. There are some Zimbabwean names here, and I do want to apologize beforehand because I will probably mess them up. I did look up one just to make sure, the main character's name. Charles Mungoshi is a Zimbabwean writer. He grew up working on his father's farm, where the time he spent alone inspired him to start creating stories. He writes in both English and Shona. Okay, just for a second, if you remember, there were 16 languages in Zimbabwe, but only 3 were widely spoken. Shona was one of them. English was another. I can't remember the third. But so Shona and English are pretty popular there. And remember, Zimbabwe, it was once colonized or conquered by the British, which is why there's a lot of English spoken there. Let's see here. What else about Charles? We already know the Shona, one of the main languages spoken in Zimbabwe, and he's won some awards. So I don't think the awards are important, but those are some pretty prestigious awards. There's always the standards we could look at, but of course we never do because that is super boring. It's actually more boring than me talking. I hope you're not that bored, but getting through some of this stuff is a little boring. I will say, maybe not true for you, this is my favorite story that we've read, and it is the most difficult story. But I think everybody can identify father-son relationship, although gender is not that important. Like it could be mother-son, it could be daughter-father, could be, what's the one I didn't mention? Mother-daughter? Yeah, it could be anytime the older generation has a disagreement with the younger generation. So maybe the way generations, they can have very different standards. You probably run into them all the time. Like, oh, Mom, what are you talking about? Dad, what are you talking about? This is what I do. So they may not understand all the technology. And certainly go to another generation, your grandparents. They're probably totally different from you. All right, so let's take a look at a couple words that could be tough as we read this. The first one is patronized. Patronize, highlight in yellow again, patronize. So, we can click on, I think, a definition here, but those always don't exactly help it. Treated someone as inferior. So let me give you an example. If somebody... It's often when you, as a teenager, are treated like a child and you can tell that person is not sincere. They don't really mean what they say. I'm trying to come up with an example right now, but, if this is one example, let's say you finished a piece of work that you were really proud of, you spent a lot of time on, and the teacher pats you on the head and says, "Oh, very good job." That would be patronizing. It's like, come on, treat me like I'm a teenager, treat me like I'm not 5, so that, and if they're not sincere, if they don't really mean it, if you can tell that, that would be patronizing. All right, the next one is obligations. Obligations right next to it. Those are things you have to do. So one of my obligations at home each week is on Wednesdays, I have to take out the trash. So you may have some obligations as well. Like, I got to do it. If I don't take out the trash, then we have 2 weeks of trash in my garage. And in the summer, that can really stink. So it's an important job. I have other obligations, but I got kids, but that's a really quick one. So hopefully in your house, one of your obligations is you have to do your schoolwork, hopefully your grades. Your parents check, good parents check the grades. Like, hey, and you have conversations like, wait, hey, what? Now you had a 97 in English class. Now it's a 94. What happened? Oh, there was kind of I didn't do so well on the vocabulary test, but, Mr. Watson said I can make it up and all that stuff. Like, oh, okay. Having those conversations. Hopefully you and your parents have conversations about grades. I promise you will do better in school if that happens. The next one, so hopefully that's an obligation. The next one, let me pull it up here. Psychological has something to do with the mind, okay? Psychological. Even like sports, right? I know there are a lot of people that play sports, so I'll use that analogy. So when you're playing a sport like basketball, you have to be physical, you have to be strong, you have to be fast, those kind of things. But there is a psychological game going on too. So if you get inside somebody's head, I think most people know psychological. Not that easy to say, but all right. So let's now get into the story. Get rid of that. We can hide that. I will probably forget the name of this story. The Setting Sun and the Rolling World. There you go. There's that tree. Take a look at it because it is gone. I would like to get rid of that. And again, I think we could have this.
The Setting Sun and the Rolling World by Charles Mungoshi.
All right. I mean, not bad, but I think I can do better. Hopefully. You may disagree, but all right. I'm a little nervous because this is a pretty hard story, I think. Lots of metaphor used in here, and I might point out some metaphor, but these stories seem to be getting a little bit more complex. All right. Old Masoni raised his dusty eyes from his hoe and the unchanging stony earth he had been tilling and peered into the sky. So this is the father here. I love some of the language that is used. Dusty eyes, great adjective to use for eyes. I mean, it right there, you know that it's going to be pretty dry out there. If it was a nice, muddy earth that he was trying to till, to take care of it, he wouldn't have dusty eyes. The white speck, whose sound had disturbed his work and thoughts, was far out at the edge of the yellow sky near the horizon. So, any ideas on what that, can we save it? On that white speck. What's that white speck? I mentioned it already. Maybe I'll pause the video and somebody can answer. What's that white speck? Well, if nobody answered it, it was probably the plane. Then it quickly disappeared over the southern rim of the sky, and he shook his head. He looked to the west. Soon the sun would go down. He looked over the sun-blasted land and saw shadows creeping east, blurrier and taller with every moment that the sun shed each of its rays, unconsciously wishing for rain and relief. He bent down again to his work and did not see his son Nemo approaching, and that is the name that I looked up, Nemo. So that sun is definitely, like, at this moment, it's the father's enemy. He wants to get his work done, but pretty hard to do that in the dark. Nemo crouched in the dust near his father and greeted him. The old man half raised his back, leaning against his hoe, and said what had been bothering him all day. You haven't changed your mind? No, father. There was a moment of silence. Old Masoni scraped earth off his hoe. Have you thought about this, son? For weeks, father. And you think that's the only way? There is no other way. The old man felt himself getting angry again. So that word lets us know that they've probably had a fight already about this. But this would be the last day he would talk to his son. If his son was going away, he must not be angry. It would be equal to a curse. He himself had taken chances before in his own time, but he felt too much of a father. So it seems right here with this line, the father knows, like, this is probably what is best for his son. He says, even as a young man, he took some chances. Sometimes you have to take risks, right? And hopefully they'll pay off. But he wants what he thinks is best for his son. Excuse me. And so often, he would want his son to play it safe. I'll tell a quick personal story. Like, my son is 14. I had to think about that for a second. My son is 14. And for this first year ever, he's away at a school. Like, so when he's gone, I miss him, of course. But I think it's best for him, for what he wants to do, to go away. Luckily, the school isn't that far. But I could have been selfish and said, no, I don't want to pay the money. No, I would rather have you around. Like, and that's the honest truth. Hopefully your parents want you around too. So, but I knew it was probably best for him to go away. So I had to be like unselfish. Yes, it's a bit of a risk. He could have played it safe and gone to EL. Definitely would have been cheaper for me. But sometimes you have to take risks and hopefully they pay off. So that's what he's saying, like the father. So as I read this, I'm probably identifying more with the father. As we continue reading this, you might identify more with the son, wanting to leave, wanting to go away. When I was 19, another quick story, I left for a month. Like, I took a gap year, college, and I left for a month back in 1995 and went to Europe. Back then, there was no internet, right? I mean, if there was internet, I didn't have access to it. And I certainly didn't have it on my phone. Nobody did in 95. I think, if you were at a college or a university, you probably had it. When I went to college the next year, I had it, but I had to be in a computer lab. It was crazy. So I know my parents, when I left for that journey of a month by myself in Europe, they probably didn't want me to go, but it was like, it's probably what's best for him. It's a bit of a risk. So you will probably have those opportunities in the near future. Even getting your license, that's a risk. It would be a lot safer if you didn't drive, but you're going to have more freedom if you learn how to drive, and there is that responsibility. Something being reckless, you could literally take somebody's life or your own life. So that's parents' decision. It's like, oh man. So you might be identifying with the son there. I don't know, but it's quite a decision for the father. But he even admits right there, like, it's probably best if he does this thing. He had worked and slaved for his family, and the land had not betrayed him. He saw nothing now but disaster and death for his son out there in the world. Lions had long since vanished, but he knew of worse animals of prey, animals that wore redder claws than the lions, beasts that would not leave an unprotected, homeless boy alone. He thought of the white metal bird and felt remorse. So I think he's worried about the other people in the world, not lions, but other people that are going to take advantage of his son, that, maybe make him work for a really low wage. He might, it looks like, and when he's homeless, I think it's like he's got to find a home there. But for a little while, he'll be searching in the big city. The father may not know of hotels. I don't know if he knows if the son has a little bit of a savings. Think again. You will end dead. Think again of us, of your family. We have a home, poor though it is. But can you think of a day you have gone without? I've thought of everything over, Father. I'm convinced this is the only way out. There is no only way out in the world except the way of the land, the way of the family. The land is overworked and gives us nothing now, Father. The family's almost broken up. The old man got angry. Yes, the land is useless. True, the family tree is uprooted and it dries in the sun. So that is definitely a metaphor. He's using, we've all heard of family trees. If somebody is uprooted, it means they have left. They've moved places. Dries in the sun. You can imagine if that's a metaphor, if it's all dried out, the relationships are not as, I would use the word fruitful, but they're not as robust as they once were. They're not as tight as they once were. True, many things are happening that haven't happened before, that we did not think would happen ever. But nothing is more certain to hold you together than the land and a home and a family. And where do you think you're going? A mere beardless kid with the milk not yet dry on your baby nose. What do you think you will do in the great treacherous world where men twice your age have gone and returned with their backs broken? If they returned at all. What do you know of life? What do you know of the false honeybird that leads you the whole day through the forest to a snake's nest? Okay, lots of metaphor there. lots of metaphor. What do you know of the false honeybird? That probably, I can pause the video right now. Let's see, get my face there. Honeybird, what do you think that could represent? Take another look at that. The false honeybird that leads you the whole day through the forest. Okay, there's another metaphor. What would the forest be? And then what's the snake's nest? It's all metaphor for what the son might be experiencing when he leaves. I'll pause the video here. Hopefully, let me bring this, make this a little bigger so we can see that sentence. What do you know of the false honeybird that leads you the whole day through the forest to a snake's nest? Okay, so metaphor. It's not really a snake. It's something else. It's not really a honeybird. Something else. Not really a forest. Something else. All right, so hopefully we've paused it, and we said something like the honeybird would be that all the money that he could make, maybe the gold, the false gold that he will get, not actual gold. I'm using metaphor again, but all the riches that he might get from moving to the city. What's the forest? It's the hard stuff that he's going to have to do, the hard work that he's going to have to do, and the snake's nest. It's those people that are going to take advantage of him, that at least the father thinks, right? It is scary sending your kids off to college or something like that. It's scary. But all he said was, look, what have you asked me, and I've denied you? So that's the father talking. Like, hey, anything you ask me, I give you. I give you. What that I have I not given you for the asking? So the father, I think, is trying to cause a little guilt trip there. Like, hey, haven't I done all this stuff for you? You've never gone without. You've never been hungry. I've always been able to provide for you. And the father is probably feeling a little bit of betrayal. Like, I did all this stuff for you. Why do you want to leave? So why don't we stop right there? It's a little over 20 minutes. And I think listening to any story, listening to any one person talk for 20 minutes could put you to sleep. So if we have 10 minutes left of class or something like that, please use the time wisely. As I say all the time, maybe work on that there, and there. That's going to be going into Power School really soon. The 2 poems, the teen letters, play some, we call it Quizlet for the upcoming Vocabulary 5 quiz. Plenty to do, I'm sure.